Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Jeffrey Epstein Show. I'm your host, Bobbycapucci, and this is a morning update. Ghislaine Maxwell was at every single function in the world, it seems like. Was there a single person in so-called high society that she did not have a photo with? Now, either Ghislaine Maxwell was the most prolific photobomber in the history of the world, or she was a lot closer to these people than they would have us believe. Every single time a picture of Ghislaine Maxwell with one of these famous people comes out, they do their best to perform a sprint away from the relationship. But how many of these photos were just photo opportunities for Ghislaine Maxwell, and how many of them were actually Ghislaine Maxwell with her friends? And I would say a good portion of these photos that you see Ghislaine Maxwell in are with people that she hobnobbed with, at least to some degree. I highly doubt people like Elon Musk are just posing for pictures with random people. Highly doubt it. Not at a gala, not at one of these events. They all know each other. They all associate. Now, that doesn't mean because you're in a picture with Ghislaine Maxwell that you were engaged in the abuse, or that you were hurting little kids, or that you were involved in sex trafficking or anything like that. But you should probably answer for it, right? And especially these people who are in multiple pictures with her, or have been spotted at multiple events with her, and they still try to use the whole entire distancing, right? These people are the real kings and queens of social distancing. Forget COVID-19. Just say the word Jeffrey Epstein, and every single person in New York City's high society will start the social distancing. In our article today from Town & Country, it talks a little bit about that, about Maxwell and how she was everywhere, taking photos with everybody in power, and how there is more behind it than just the photo a lot of times. So let's jump into this article from Town & Country and see what they have to say. Headline: Ghislaine Maxwell took party photos with a who's who of power and influence. Well, that seems, that it's not too, it's pretty innocuous, on the outside looking in, right? Until you find out who Ghislaine Maxwell was, and you find out that Ghislaine Maxwell and Jeffrey Epstein were providing girls and underage girls to the so-called high society, well, then it becomes a little bit more sinister. This article was authored by Hannah Seligson. There was once a time in New York City when Ghislaine Maxwell was a bona fide Olympic-level social marathoner. And there's no doubt, from all of the pictures and all of the accounts that we've heard, Ghislaine Maxwell was invited and accepted at the highest levels of social life. We know that Jeff Bezos even invited her to those little hideaways that they had, right? Nobody ever talked about it. Nobody ever mentioned it, really. But even after Ghislaine Maxwell was caught up with Jeffrey Epstein and his first arrest, these people like Jeff Bezos still had her as part of society. Nobody balked. Nobody thought twice. It was all good. Ghislaine was at literally every lit candle in New York City and the Hamptons, both public and private. If there was a red velvet rope, she was there, says publicist R. Corey Hay, who ran into Maxwell at events for more than a decade. Yeah, that was her role, right? To weasel her way into polite society, to get Jeffrey Epstein's foot in the door so that Epstein could bring more of these rich and powerful people under his thumb by getting them caught up in this blackmail ring. It is so obvious if you follow all of these dots, if you line up all of the puzzle pieces. It is so obvious what was going on here that it makes my head hurt that the legacy media has not put the pieces together. Or should I say, they probably have put the pieces together. but they continue to not tell the whole story. It is just so maddening at this point. She was at art openings, movie screenings, book parties at the Four Seasons, a former friend says. In the 2000s, you couldn't go out a night without bumping into her. And that was the role, right? She was out there, she's looking for models, she's looking for young girls, she's cruising Central Park looking for nubiles. This is how Ghislaine Maxwell rolled. But her main goal, her function, was to embed her and the Epstein enterprise within polite society. The English accent, the hoity-toity life, the Oxford education, all of that played a role. And photographers were there to capture all of it. Party chronicler Patrick McMullen snapped more than 400 pictures of Maxwell between 1995 and 2016. Now, any single picture that was taken after Epstein's first arrest should make alarm bells ring a ding-dong in your head. Because listen to me clearly, okay? Every single person who was hanging out with Ghislaine Maxwell after Epstein's first arrest has zero defense for that behavior. Everybody knew that Ghislaine Maxwell was a co-conspirator. Everybody knew about the immunity deal, and they all still chose to hang out with her. There are images of her with Prince Andrew at Ascot and next to Naomi Campbell at a fashion show. She was photographed with the Trumps at Mar-a-Lago and at Chelsea Clinton's wedding, where she was a guest. She seemed to know everyone, and even if she didn't exactly know them, she posed with them anyway. She was just very good at the photobomb, Hayes says. So, maybe she was the queen of the photobomb. Maybe she was that kind of person, like the clown in high school or whatever, that always tries to put the fingers up behind your head or whatever have you. Was that Ghislaine Maxwell? Or was she taking photos with these people because they were her friends? I'm going to say that it's a mixture, right? I'm guessing that she definitely photobombed some of these people, but there's zero chance that these people who have been photographed with her and then spotted with her at other events, etc., were not her friends. They could try the long-distance marathoning, but it's not going to work out so well for them. Now, of course, Maxwell is far better known as convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein's alleged fixer, co-conspirator, fellow child abuser, general all-around scumbag, and she is awaiting trial in Brooklyn's Metropolitan Detention Center on 6 federal charges, including enticement of minors, sex trafficking, and perjury. Now, you see, there's still some people out there, especially on Twitter, that are, they run around and they act like the wheels of justice aren't turning in this case now, when they obviously are. And I am very cautious of people like that. People like that are just people I try to steer clear of because they obviously have other motivations than justice in this case, right? For me, I don't care about anything. All that other nonsense is just background noise to me. I'm here to grind 2 episodes a day, follow the news as it breaks until we get justice. There are way too many people that have a vested interest in this case plugging along, right? And they want to keep making it out like justice isn't coming. Well, I have news for you folks, all right? It hasn't come in a very long time. But Ghislaine Maxwell is rotting in a jail cell. Her co-conspirators are on the run. And the remnants of Jeffrey Epstein's sex trafficking operation are being shattered as we speak. So we have to let's be honest, when we're calling our shots, right? I was very critical of prosecution all the way up into Ghislaine Maxwell's arrest. Now we're in a new phase. Let's see what happens from here. And those photographs have come back to haunt the many people who worked a step and repeat with her. There is even an Instagram account at Celebs with Ghislaine devoted to the famous and fame-adjacent Snapped with Maxwell. Everyone I know is embarrassed by these photos with Ghislaine, says Hay. And there's a photo here of Mick Jagger with Ghislaine Maxwell. And we know from various reports that Mick Jagger's wife was super close with Ghislaine Maxwell. So I'm guessing Mick Jagger knows Ghislaine Maxwell very closely, very intimately. Just to be clear, I've never been a fan of the Rolling Stones, by the way. How do you explain having had your arm around someone who is charged with child sex trafficking? That calls for an entirely different form of social distancing, the kind that preserves the health of your reputation. Yeah, no doubt about it. Look, all of these people are social distancing champions at this point. Every single one of these people that Maxwell was rolling with, every single one of these people that Maxwell was sitting at the dinner table with at these events, all of these people are doing their best impersonation of a top-notch marathon runner as they attempt to put distance between them and their relationship with Maxwell. Many people have quietly established plausible deniability, making it clear to friends that they never saw anything inappropriate happening, much less criminal. Campbell went so far as to shoot a video of herself, saying that she has been photographed with hundreds of thousands of people and can't possibly know what all of them are doing. Yeah, well, how many of those people have you been breaking bread with? How many of those people do you know intimately? Naomi Campbell. To act like you don't know Ghislaine Maxwell and Jeffrey Epstein is laughable at best. Oh, also, what about the photos of an underage girl at your gala, Naomi? To be sure, if you go out enough in New York, you run a distinct risk of being photographed with someone who later becomes infamous. Well, there's no doubt New York, and especially polite society in New York, is a den of pit vipers filled with bipedal serpents and scumbags. So yeah, that's definitely the case. I've said that a million times. You can't run the New York social circuit without running into these assholes and these idiots. But that doesn't mean you should break bread with them. That doesn't mean that you should be at Epstein's townhouse. That's taking it a whole different step, a whole giant step in a different direction, my friends. Think of everyone who now regrets smiling for the camera next to Harvey Weinstein in his Miramax heyday. Society people have gotten more practice over the decades dealing with people in their ranks who are in major trouble. Yeah, that's because society is starting to swing. People are starting to get fed up, really fed up, with these idiots in power and with these jerk-offs with money who always seem to get the sweetheart deal. Well, locking us in our homes for 6 months was probably not the best idea, because guess what? People are paying attention now. Even people who never paid attention to this shit, politics and otherwise, are locked in. Usually it's financial trickery, but there was the Klaus von Bülow murder trial and O.J. Simpson. And that's for sure, right? Usually these idiots are engaged in some kind of financial douchebaggery, and that's what they get caught for. But now this is a whole different kind of animal. But plenty of people can't escape the fact that they socialized with Maxwell for years. She was the best possible company. She had wit, intelligence, and a sense of mystery, says Christopher Mason, a British author and journalist who was friendly with Maxwell in the 90s. You know, this Mason guy is somebody that probably should be talked to as well. He seems to have a very intimate knowledge of Ghislaine Maxwell. Did he ever see anything? Was he ever at any parties with her and Jeffrey Epstein? Were there any underage girls there? It never struck any of us that she might be involved in this horrifying sexual depravity. Yeah, okay, sure, Mr. Mason. Mason says that while most of her social circle isn't running to visit her in jail, he hasn't heard about anyone from Maxwell's past pretending that they barely knew her. Yeah, well, they should be. Prince Dmitry of Yugoslavia, who has known Maxwell since the 70s, agrees. I certainly am not embarrassed. There is no reason to be. None of us had the faintest idea of what she was doing. Yeah, okay, Prince Dmitri of Yugoslavia. How many times were you on the plane, pal? How many times were you over at Jeffrey Epstein's house? Maybe we should do a deep dive into Prince Dmitri of Yugoslavia, who has known Maxwell since the 70s. That means he probably knew her scumbag dad, too. None of us had the faintest idea of what she was doing. How about after the first trial, you epic asshole? No idea, huh? But the awful realization that Maxwell was up to something very dark has left many former friends deeply unsettled. It's a nagging feeling of distrust, says one former friend who was photographed with her multiple times and who visited Epstein's little St. James Island in the early 2000s in a helicopter Maxwell piloted. Oh, wait a minute. Didn't Dershowitz tell us that Maxwell wasn't ferreting people around in helicopters to the island? Mr. Dershowitz, sure seems like there is another inconsistency in your story. The friend says that what she knows about Epstein and Maxwell's alleged crimes, she learned from the Netflix documentary Filthy Rich. It's a lesson that while you think you know someone, it may turn out they are not who they pretend to be. Such bullshit. So you didn't know anything about Epstein and Maxwell's behavior, huh, friend? It took this documentary to come out for you to know what they were up to, huh, friend? You didn't have the internet? You didn't have a newspaper? You didn't see that Epstein was arrested for what he was arrested for, and that Ghislaine Maxwell was a co-conspirator? You didn't see any of that stuff? Just flew by you? As Sebastian Maniscalco would say, people. At this particular moment, having a photograph surface of yourself with Maxwell or Epstein is a worst case, call the PR team scenario. Does that mean everyone will avoid the cameras from now on? Probably not. Eventually, parties will start up again, and the casual snap by paparazzi or another attendee is much a part of the ritual, not to mention a signifier of one's relative importance, as getting whisked through the door. That alone is a problem with society. If you're running around with all this money in your pocket, right, and the only thing that matters is getting your picture taken at the party in New York, you are part of the problem, okay? It's not a Democrat problem. It's not a Republican problem. It's a rich-ass, so-called polite society problem. And when everybody else figures that out, and we all figure out that it's not the pitchforks and the torches who have a problem with each other, it's the pitchforks and the torches who have a problem with the guy in the castle. Once we figure that shit out, then we're going to be on the right path. People go out to be seen and to see. Usually it's a nothing moment. Sometimes it goes terribly wrong, but occasionally it pays off. A recent example, as election season heated up, think of all the people who posted photos of themselves with their favorite candidate, posing at fundraisers past. These photos were stored in camera rolls for months or even years, just waiting for the perfect moment to make their debut. And with the age we're in, with all of the technology, right? Everybody has cameras, not just photographers, not just people hired to shoot the party. If you're hanging out with people like Ghislaine Maxwell, years and years after the fact, her partner in crime was arrested for sex crimes and is a convicted sex offender, and Ghislaine Maxwell was also caught up in that, you might be a scumbag. So all of you people in New York, so-called polite high society, that are trying to run a marathon to distance themselves from Ghislaine Maxwell and Jeffrey Epstein, you will not be successful. We see you and we hear you, and we most certainly are paying attention now. If you'd like to contact me, you can do that at bobbycapucci@protonmail.com. That's BOBBYCAPUCCI@protonmail.com. You can also find me on Twitter at BOBBY_CAPUCCI. All right, everybody. All of the links that go with this episode can be found in the description box. As for your boy, I'll be back later on.